Act I, The Anatomy of the Watcher. Scene start. Visual, slowly zooming out from a grainy, highly contrasted black and white photograph of an ordinary suburban street in the 1960s. The image is inexplicably stamped with a red, classified marker. A low, synthetic drone hums in the background, steady and unnerving, like a heart monitor for a machine. Narrator. There is a philosophical paradox inherent in the act of observation. The moment a subject realizes they are being watched, their behavior changes. They alter their routines. They whisper instead of speaking. They glance over their shoulders. The observer, attempting to study the natural state of the subject, invariably destroys that natural state. But what happens when the observer is not merely content with watching? What happens when the watcher's objective is to systematically break the subject's psyche, fracture their reality, and turn their paranoia from a symptom of observation into a self-fulfilling prophecy of destruction? Pause 3 seconds. Visual, quick cut to a close-up of a turning reel-to-reel tape recorder. The audio clicks as if a phone receiver has just been picked up. A faint, unintelligible whisper is heard underneath the drone. Narrator. Between the years 1956 and 1971, the Federal Bureau of Investigation did not simply watch the American public. They weaponized observation. They engineered a program of psychological warfare, domestic sabotage, and covert disruption so profound that its exact boundaries remain obscured by redacted documents and destroyed evidence. This was not a law enforcement operation. Law enforcement implies a reaction to a crime. This was a preemptive strike on the human mind. This was COINTELPRO. Visual, the word COINTELPRO types itself out in a stark, monospace font across the screen. The drone pitch shifts downward, becoming a deep rumble. Narrator. COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program, represents the darkest intersection of state power and psychological manipulation in modern Western history. For 15 years, under the absolute autocracy of Director J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI executed thousands of covert actions against American citizens. The targets were not foreign spies. They were civil rights leaders, anti-war protesters, feminists, environmentalists, and anyone who possessed the potential to agitate the established social order. Visual, montage of heavily redacted FBI memos flashing on screen. We see black marker obscuring entire paragraphs. Only words like neutralize, disrupt, and destroy remain legible. Narrator. To understand COINTELPRO, one must abandon the concept of the FBI as investigators of crime. Within the context of this program, the Bureau functioned as a domestic intelligence agency operating entirely outside the boundaries of the United States Constitution. Their goal, explicitly stated in internal memoranda, was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize specific groups and individuals. The term neutralize is particularly chilling. It is a clinical word, sanitized of violence, yet its application was fundamentally violent. It meant the systematic dismantling of an individual's reputation, their livelihood, their familial bonds, and, in several documented cases, their physical life. Pause 2 seconds. Visual, slowly panning over a portrait of J. Edgar Hoover, his expression stern, his eyes locked on the camera. The lighting is harsh, casting long shadows across his face. Narrator. At the center of this apparatus sat J. Edgar Hoover. Analyzing Hoover through the lens of psychology reveals a mind consumed by a specific taxonomy of paranoia. He did not fear criminals, he feared ideological contamination. To Hoover, the civil rights movement was not a demand for equality, it was an existential threat to the American paradigm. He viewed the social fabric as fragile, entirely dependent on a rigid, unchanging hierarchy. Any deviation from this structure was interpreted not as dissent, but as a pathogenic infection requiring eradication. Hoover's FBI was characterized by an obsessive need for control. This control was maintained through the accumulation of intelligence. Hoover understood a fundamental truth about power: he who holds the secrets holds the leash. The Bureau compiled millions of files on citizens, cataloging their sexual preferences, financial difficulties, marital indiscretions, and personal vices. This was not data collected for prosecution, it was ammunition stockpiled for blackmail. Visual, an animation showing a filing cabinet drawer opening, revealing thousands of index cards. The camera dives into one of the cards, which dissolves into a web of connections, lines linking names, addresses, and phone numbers. Narrator. The architecture of COINTELPRO was inherently compartmentalized. Even within the Bureau, few agents knew the full scope of the program. It was divided into specific operations targeting different ideologies: the Communist Party, the Socialist Workers' Party, white hate groups, black nationalist hate groups, and the New Left. However, the nomenclature was often a deliberate misdirection. The black nationalist hate groups category, for instance, was heavily utilized to target non-violent civil rights organizations, including the Southern Christian Leadership Conference headed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Pause 3 seconds. Visual, a slow pan over the text of the original 1956 memo authorizing COINTELPRO against the Communist Party. The signature, J. Edgar Hoover, is prominently displayed. Narrator. The program began in 1956, initially aimed at the Communist Party of the United States. The initial tactics were relatively primitive compared to what they would become. Agents used anonymous mailings to create friction between party members, planted informants to disrupt meetings, and harassed members' employers to ensure they lost their jobs. The Bureau discovered that direct prosecution was often less effective, and more legally burdensome, than internal destabilization. If you can convince a group that its leadership is corrupt, or that its members are informers, the group will consume itself. The FBI realized that paranoia was a more efficient weapon than a subpoena. Visual, a graphic displaying the iceberg model. The tip above water reads, public arrests and trials. The massive block of ice below reads, infiltration, blackmail, psychological warfare, provocation. Narrator. This realization formed the bedrock of COINTELPRO. The public face of the FBI, the stoic agents in suits arresting bank robbers, was merely the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, the Bureau was operating a massive, unregulated laboratory of psychological warfare. They were testing the limits of human endurance, applying pressure points to organizational structures to see how quickly they would collapse. The transition from targeting the Communist Party to targeting the broader civil rights movement marked a significant escalation. As the 1960s began, the Bureau turned its vast intelligence-gathering apparatus toward American citizens demanding basic constitutional rights. The machinery of surveillance was recalibrated. Wiretaps were installed without warrants. Microphones were hidden in hotel rooms. The FBI was no longer simply watching, they were actively preparing the battlefield. Pause 3 seconds. Visual, the screen fades to absolute black. The sound of a typewriter violently striking paper echoes in the darkness. Narrator. To dismantle a movement, you do not attack its ideas. Ideas are immaterial, they are resistant to kinetic force. To dismantle a movement, you attack its vectors. You attack the humans who carry the ideas. You study their flaws, their anxieties, their secrets. And then, you apply the precise amount of psychological pressure required to shatter them from the inside out. This was the methodology of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And their first major target was the moral center of the American civil rights movement. Scene end. Act 2, the architecture of paranoia and the destruction of a king. Scene start. Visual, fade in on a slow, continuous tracking shot through a sterile, dimly lit hallway lined with identical, closed doors. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead. The sound of a heartbeat, slow and methodical, begins to throb in the audio track. Narrator. When examining the archives of COINTELPRO, one is struck not merely by the illegality of the operations, but by the sheer, staggering volume of bureaucratic meticulousness applied to the destruction of human lives. The FBI did not destroy its targets in a frenzy of chaotic violence. They destroyed them with memos. They destroyed them with triplicate forms, routing slips, and neatly typed reports. The banality of the bureaucracy masked the absolute cruelty of the intent. Every covert action required authorization. An agent in the field would propose a method to neutralize a target. This proposal would travel up the chain of command, reviewed and refined by supervisors, until it reached the desk of the assistant director, and frequently, Hoover himself. This process implies a terrifying reality. The psychological warfare deployed by the FBI was not the work of rogue agents. It was institutionalized. It was policy. Visual, a close-up of a typewriter striking the page, the letters forming the words, subject, Martin Luther King, Jr., security matter, ... Narrator. No individual was subjected to a more concentrated, obsessive, and vicious campaign of psychological destruction than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to J. Edgar Hoover. King was the ultimate adversary. He possessed charisma, moral authority, and an unprecedented ability to mobilize the masses. Following King's "I Have a Dream" speech in August 1963, William C. Sullivan, the head of the FBI's Domestic Intelligence Division, wrote a memorandum that perfectly encapsulated the Bureau's perspective. Sullivan wrote, "We must mark him now, if we have not done so before, as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation." Pause 2 seconds. Visual, a split screen. On the left, archive footage of MLK speaking passionately to a crowd. On the right, a slow pan over FBI surveillance logs detailing his movements minute by minute. Narrator. The FBI's campaign against King was an exercise in total surveillance. The objective was not to find evidence of a crime. The objective was to find leverage. They sought to map his psychological vulnerabilities, to identify every flaw, every fear, and every private indiscretion. Under the pretense of investigating alleged communist ties within King's inner circle, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy authorized the wiretapping of King's phones in late 1963. But the FBI did not stop at wiretaps. They installed hidden microphones, bugs, in King's hotel rooms across the country. They monitored his conversations, his meetings, his private moments. The resulting audio was meticulously transcribed, analyzed, and catalogued. The Bureau amassed an unprecedented archive of King's personal life. They documented his extramarital affairs, capturing audio that they believed could be used to shatter his public image and destroy his marriage. Visual: the camera slowly zooms in on a reel-to-reel tape, spinning silently in the dark. The faint, distorted sound of static and muffled voices plays beneath the narration. Narrator: this intelligence was weaponized through a strategy of aggressive dissemination. The FBI attempted to plant derogatory stories about King in the press. They briefed political leaders, religious figures, and university administrators, sharing rumors and selected snippets of surveillance transcripts to undermine his support. They attempted to prevent him from receiving honorary degrees, meeting with the Pope, and securing funding for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. However, the media, largely respecting the unwritten rules regarding the private lives of public figures at the time, refused to publish the salacious details. The FBI's indirect approach was failing. King's influence continued to grow. In 1964, it was announced that King would be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Inside the Bureau, the reaction was apocalyptic. Hoover's hatred crystallized into an active operational imperative: King had to be stopped immediately, and by any means necessary. Pause 3 seconds. Visual: the screen cuts to stark white. A single, typewritten document appears in the center. The text is dense, the edges rough. This is the infamous suicide package letter. Narrator: the culmination of this obsession manifested in one of the most chilling documents in the history of American intelligence, the anonymous letter sent to King in November 1964, just days before he was to travel to Oslo to receive the Nobel Prize. The letter was drafted by William Sullivan's division and was accompanied by an audio tape containing selected recordings from the hotel room bugs. The letter, written purportedly by a disillusioned black supporter, is a masterpiece of psychological violence. It is not merely a threat, it is an attempt to induce psychological collapse. The tone is hysterical, vicious, and deeply unhinged. Visual: the camera highlights specific phrases from the letter, the text glowing an eerie red against the white background. Narrator: the text reads, in part, "King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do it. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal fraudulent self is bared to the nation." Pause 4 seconds. Narrator: the FBI was explicitly attempting to drive Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to suicide. Let us pause to fully comprehend the magnitude of this action. A federal law enforcement agency, utilizing immense state resources, executed a calculated psychological operation designed to coerce a civilian leader into taking his own life. This was not a rogue agent acting out of turn. This was a carefully planned, systematically approved operation. Visual: a slow dissolve to a photograph of Coretta Scott King, her expression unreadable. The camera slowly pushes in on her eyes. Narrator: the package was opened not by King, but by his wife, Coretta. The FBI had failed to anticipate this variable, or perhaps, in their cruelty, they had calculated it. The psychological damage inflicted upon the King family was immense. While King did not succumb to the Bureau's demand, the knowledge that he was under constant, pervasive, and malevolent surveillance haunted him for the rest of his life. The Watcher had successfully invaded the subject's reality, ensuring that every private moment was tainted by the phantom presence of the state. Visual: the camera pulls back, showing the letter resting on a desk covered in dozens of similar FBI memos. The desk seems to stretch endlessly into the darkness. Narrator: the FBI's war on King did not end with the suicide letter. It continued relentlessly until his assassination in Memphis in 1968. The Bureau shadowed his every move, attempted to disrupt his Poor People's Campaign, and systematically undermined his leadership. Even after his death, the FBI attempted to derail legislative efforts to establish a national holiday in his honor. The bureaucracy of paranoia demanded not only his physical death, but the eradication of his legacy. But King was merely the highest-profile target. As the 1960s fractured and the civil rights movement evolved into more militant factions, COINTELPRO metastasized. The Bureau shifted its gaze from the nonviolent protests of the SCLC to a new, more aggressive threat, a group that the FBI viewed not just as ideological adversaries, but as an insurgent army operating within American cities. Scene end. Act 3, the weaponization of paranoia and the art of snitch jacketing. Scene start. Visual: a montage of high-contrast, fast-paced black and white 16mm footage, Black Panthers marching in formation, leather jackets, berets, holding firearms. Intercut with rapid flashes of FBI surveillance photographs, telephoto lens shots taken from unmarked vans. The sound of a heartbeat from the previous act accelerates, morphing into the rhythmic, aggressive beat of a snare drum. Narrator: by the late 1960s, the political landscape had shifted. The nonviolent strategies of the early civil rights movement had yielded legislative victories, but systemic poverty, police brutality, and urban disenfranchisement remained entrenched. From this frustration emerged the Black Panther Party for self-defense. The Panthers represented everything J. Edgar Hoover feared: armed, organized, ideologically militant, and fundamentally defiant. In 1968, Hoover publicly declared the Black Panther Party to be the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. This declaration was an operational mandate. The FBI escalated COINTELPRO from harassment and blackmail to a strategy of total eradication. The Bureau did not simply want to arrest the Panthers, they wanted to destroy the organization from the inside out. To achieve this, they deployed the most insidious psychological weapon in their arsenal: paranoia. Pause 2 seconds. Visual: the screen fractures into multiple smaller screens, each showing a different, blurry face, informants. The images are constantly shifting, glitching, creating a sense of instability and distrust. Narrator: the fundamental objective of COINTELPRO against the Panthers was to render the organization functionally paralyzed by internal suspicion. If members could not trust one another, they could not organize. They could not communicate. They could not survive. The FBI achieved this through a dense, overlapping network of informants and agent provocateurs. An informant merely watches and reports. An agent provocateur actively instigates. The FBI flooded the Panther chapters with individuals tasked not only with gathering intelligence but with pushing the organization toward violence, extremism, and internal conflict. These provocateurs would advocate for bombings, suggest assassinations, and supply weapons, precisely so the FBI could then arrest the genuine members for the crimes the Bureau itself had engineered. Visual, a close-up of a hand, wearing a dark glove, dropping a single, unmarked white envelope onto a wooden table. The camera slowly zooms in on the envelope. Narrator. But the physical presence of infiltrators was only half the strategy. The psychological genius of COINTELPRO lay in a tactic known within the Bureau as snitch jacketing. Snitch jacketing is the deliberate, calculated process of making a genuine, loyal member of an organization appear to be an FBI informant. The goal is to induce the group into turning on its own. Visual, an animated sequence. A silhouetted figure stands in a group. An FBI agent, hidden in shadows, points a beam of light at the figure. The other members of the group turn, their eyes glowing red, and attack the illuminated figure. Narrator. The mechanics of a snitch jacket operation were remarkably simple, yet devastatingly effective. The FBI would orchestrate situations designed to cast suspicion on a specific, often highly effective, member of the target group. They might arrange for that member to be inexplicably released from police custody while others were held without bail. They might plant forged letters or fake FBI reports in places where other members would accidentally discover them. They would use anonymous phone calls or counterfeit underground newspaper articles to spread rumors that the individual was cooperating with the state. Pause 3 seconds. Visual, a series of rapid cuts, a forged letter with an FBI letterhead, a mimeographed flyer accusing a panther of treason, a photograph of a bloody street corner. The snare drum beat becomes erratic, chaotic. Narrator. In the hypervigilant, high-stakes environment of the Black Panther Party, an organization literally at war with local police departments, being labeled an informant was not merely a loss of reputation. It was a death sentence. The FBI knew this. They understood the lethal consequences of their psychological games, and they utilized them with sociopathic precision. When a group is under constant external pressure, the internal bonds become fragile. The FBI systematically exploited this fragility. They created a reality where the enemy was not just the police officer on the street, but the brother sitting next to you at the meeting. They engineered an atmosphere where loyalty was an illusion and betrayal was inevitable. The psychological toll of existing within this engineered paranoia was catastrophic. Members suffered nervous breakdowns, abandoned the movement, or turned against their comrades in preemptive strikes of desperate violence. Visual, the camera slowly pans across a massive corkboard connected by red string. But instead of connecting clues, the string forms a chaotic, tangled web, leading nowhere. It is a visual representation of confusion and misdirection. Narrator. The Bureau's documentation of these operations is chilling in its detachment. Memos coldly calculate the probability of violence resulting from a snitch jacket. One document, discussing the targeting of a local Panther leader, explicitly stated that the goal was to create a situation where the leader would be disciplined by his own organization, noting that such discipline could include physical violence or assassination. The FBI was not merely acting as an observer, they were functioning as an unseen puppet master, pulling the strings of internal conflict and watching as the organization bled itself dry. This was the architecture of invisible violence. The state did not need to pull the trigger if it could manipulate the mind of the target into pulling the trigger themselves, or turning it upon their allies. But when psychological warfare proved insufficient to eliminate a particularly charismatic or effective leader, the FBI was prepared to abandon the shadows. They were prepared to coordinate lethal, kinetic force. They were prepared for Chicago. Scene end. Act 4, Lethal Provocation and the Chicago Assassination. Scene start. Visual, the screen is completely black. The sound of heavy, synchronized breathing. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the deafening sound of a shotgun blast, followed by a barrage of automatic gunfire. The screen flashes white with every gunshot, revealing only split-second glimpses of a blood-stained mattress and bullet-riddled walls. The gunfire stops. Silence returns, heavy and suffocating. Narrator. When the psychological architecture of COINTELPRO failed to neutralize a target, the FBI escalated to direct, state-sponsored violence. The operation against the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, and specifically its charismatic 21-year-old chairman, Fred Hampton, stands as the most brutal and incontrovertible evidence of this escalation. Fred Hampton was not merely a militant, he was a brilliant organizer. He had achieved the impossible. He was brokering a rainbow coalition, uniting the Black Panthers with the Young Patriots, a group of poor, white Appalachian migrants, and the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican street gang. To J. Edgar Hoover, a leader capable of uniting disparate, marginalized groups across racial lines was the ultimate nightmare scenario. Hampton possessed the precise combination of intellect, charisma, and strategic vision that the FBI was determined to eradicate. He had to be stopped. And a memo had to be written to authorize it. Pause 3 seconds. Visual, a blueprint of an apartment layout appears on screen. The camera focuses on a specific room, marked Hampton's bedroom. The blueprint is stamped with an FBI seal. Narrator. The FBI's operation against Hampton was a masterclass in lethal coordination. It relied entirely on the betrayal of an infiltrator. William O'Neill was an FBI informant who had successfully penetrated the inner circle of the Chicago Black Panthers, rising to the position of Chief of Security. O'Neill provided the FBI with highly detailed intelligence, including the floor plan of Hampton's apartment, noting exactly where Hampton slept and the location of his bed. But O'Neill's role was not limited to surveillance. On the evening of December 3, 1969, O'Neill prepared dinner for Hampton and several other Panthers. According to later investigations and forensic evidence, O'Neill slipped a massive dose of secobarbital, a powerful barbiturate, into Hampton's drink. The objective was clear: render the target unconscious and defenseless. Visual, a slow pan over police crime scene photographs from the aftermath of the raid. The images are graphic and uncompromising. Bullet holes trace lines across the walls. The blood-soaked mattress dominates the center of the frame. Narrator. At 4 a.m. on December 4, a heavily armed tactical unit of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, operating in direct coordination with the FBI and acting on O'Neill's intelligence, raided the apartment. They came with a warrant for illegal weapons, but the execution of the raid resembled a military execution squad. The police fired nearly 100 rounds into the apartment. The Panthers fired, at most, a single shot. Mark Clark, a Panther leader from Peoria, was killed instantly. The police then moved to Hampton's bedroom. According to subsequent investigations and witness testimony, officers fired directly into the bed. Hampton was shot twice in the head at point-blank range. Pause 4 seconds. Visual, the camera slowly zooms in on a smiling photograph of Fred Hampton, radiating youth and energy. The image slowly desaturates until it is completely gray. Narrator. The FBI had achieved its objective. The target was neutralized. The initial public narrative, carefully constructed by the police and echoed by the FBI, claimed that the Panthers had initiated a fierce gun battle. The media, compliant and uncritical, repeated this narrative. But the physical evidence, the bullet trajectories, the concentration of fire, the chemical analysis of Hampton's blood, told the undeniable truth of an assassination. The murder of Fred Hampton was the kinetic climax of COINTELPRO, but it was not the only instance of the FBI engineering lethal violence. Across the country, in California, the Bureau had been cultivating a deadly rivalry between the Black Panther Party and a black nationalist group known as the U.S. Organization, led by Ron Karenga. Visual: two distinct logos, the Black Panther and the U.S. Organization symbol, are displayed on opposite sides of the screen. A jagged red line fractures the space between them, growing wider and more violent. Narrator. The FBI recognized the ideological friction between the two groups and actively sought to exploit it. They drafted forged letters, incredibly vicious in tone, supposedly from one group to the other. They planted cartoons insulting the leadership of both organizations. They utilized informants to spread rumors of impending assassinations. The explicit goal, documented in internal memos, was to capitalize on the differences between the two organizations, and to escalate the conflict. The operation was horrifyingly successful. The FBI's psychological manipulation triggered a cycle of violent retaliation. In 1969, members of the U.S. organization assassinated two prominent Black Panthers, Al Prentice, Bunchy, Carter and John Huggins, on the campus of UCLA. The Bureau did not arrest the perpetrators. Instead, internal memos expressed satisfaction that the operation had yielded fatal results. The FBI had successfully utilized proxy violence to eliminate its targets, keeping its own hands physically clean while the streets ran with blood. Pause 3 seconds. Visual: a montage of chaos, protests, burning buildings, police batons striking protesters, screaming faces. The audio is a cacophony of sirens, shouting, and breaking glass. Narrator. This was the reality of COINTELPRO at its zenith. It was a machine of societal destruction. It tore through the Black Liberation Movement, the anti-war movement, and the New Left, leaving a trail of shattered organizations, traumatized individuals, and corpses in its wake. The Bureau operated with total impunity, entirely convinced of its righteous mandate and insulated by an impenetrable wall of secrecy. They believed they were the untouchable guardians of the American paradigm, operating in the dark, forever unseen. But the darkness is fragile. It requires absolute containment. And in 1971, a small group of ordinary citizens, armed only with lockpicks and a profound sense of moral outrage, decided to breach the fortress and drag the Watcher into the light. Scene end. Act V: The Breach and the Illumination of the Dark Arts. Scene start. Visual: the screen shows a grainy, nighttime photograph of a generic, unexceptional brick building, a small-town post office or a branch office. The camera slowly zooms in on a side door. The faint, metallic scratching of a lockpick echoes in the silence. Narrator. Totalitarian control relies entirely on the asymmetry of information. The state must know everything about the subject, while the subject must know nothing about the state. For 15 years, J. Edgar Hoover maintained this asymmetry with ruthless efficiency. The FBI was a black box. Intelligence went in, disruption came out. The inner workings remained utterly opaque. But on the night of March 8, 1971, the black box was pried open. While the nation was captivated by the fight of the century between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, a group of 8 anti-war activists, who called themselves the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI, executed a remarkably simple, yet historically devastating burglary. They broke into a small, undersecured FBI resident agency in Media, Pennsylvania. Their objective was not money or weapons. Their objective was truth. Visual: the sound of a crowbar forcing a metal cabinet drawer. A flashlight beam cuts across the screen, illuminating stacks of manila folders. Narrator: the activists stole over 1,000 classified documents. They packed them into suitcases, loaded them into a getaway car, and vanished into the night. When they began to read the stolen files in a remote farmhouse, they did not find records of bank robberies or kidnapping investigations. They found the blueprint of a domestic terror apparatus. They found routing slips authorizing the harassment of college professors. They found transcripts of wiretaps on student organizers. They found directives to infiltrate peace groups and provoke violence. And, buried within the thousands of pages, they found a single, cryptic acronym that appeared repeatedly on routing slips detailing the most egregious psychological warfare tactics: COINTELPRO. Pause 2 seconds. Visual: a close-up of a mimeograph machine spinning rapidly. Sheets of paper, covered in text, fly out. The sound is rhythmic, like a mechanical drumbeat. Narrator: the Citizens Commission did not attempt to negotiate. They did not attempt to blackmail the Bureau. They systematically mailed copies of the stolen files to journalists, politicians, and the very activists who were being targeted. The asymmetry of information had been violently inverted. The watcher was suddenly, and irrevocably, the watched. The release of the media files triggered an earthquake within the American political establishment. The FBI, previously viewed as an incorruptible paragon of law enforcement, was exposed as a rogue intelligence agency engaged in massive, systematic violations of the Constitution. Journalists, finally armed with documentary evidence rather than paranoia-induced rumors, began to investigate the full scope of the Bureau's operations. Visual: a newspaper headline dominating the screen, screaming, "Stolen FBI files reveal covert war on citizens." The camera pans across various articles detailing the blackmail, the infiltration, and the psychological abuse. Narrator: the exposure forced J. Edgar Hoover to formally terminate COINTELPRO in April 1971, barely a month after the break-in. However, the termination of the acronym did not necessarily mean the termination of the methodology. The psychological architecture had been built. The neural pathways of paranoia had been established. The damage was already done. The true reckoning, however, came several years later. In 1975, in the wake of the Watergate scandal and a growing climate of deep public mistrust in government, the United States Senate formed the Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, better known as the Church Committee, chaired by Senator Frank Church. Visual: archive footage of the Church Committee hearings. Stately senators sit at long wooden tables, looking grim. The camera cuts to the witness table, where former intelligence officials sit, squirming under the lights. Narrator: The Church Committee hearings laid bare the staggering, sociopathic extent of COINTELPRO. The American public was forced to confront the reality that their government had actively sought to destroy the lives of thousands of its own citizens. The committee documented the suicide letter sent to Martin Luther King Jr., the fabrication of evidence against the Black Panthers, the instigation of gang violence, and the systematic destruction of reputations and livelihoods. In its final report, the Church Committee delivered a devastating assessment. Many of the techniques used would be intolerable in a democratic society even if all of the targets had been involved in violent activity, but COINTELPRO went far beyond that. The Bureau conducted a sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association. Pause 3 seconds. Visual: a slow dissolve to a towering, brutalist government building in Washington, D.C., the J. Edgar Hoover FBI building. The camera tilts up to the imposing concrete facade, capturing its fortress-like nature. Narrator: the Church Committee resulted in new guidelines intended to restrict the FBI's domestic intelligence gathering and prevent future abuses. But the legacy of COINTELPRO is not contained within legislative reforms. Its legacy is embedded in the psychological trauma of the movements it destroyed. It is embedded in the lingering paranoia that infects modern activism. The Bureau successfully demonstrated that reality itself could be weaponized, that trust could be manufactured and destroyed, that paranoia could be injected directly into the bloodstream of a community. Scene end. Act 6, The New Left and the Saturation of Media Paranoia. Scene start. Visual: archival footage of college campus protests in the late 1960s. Thousands of students chanting, holding signs against the Vietnam War. Tear gas canisters arching through the air. The camera moves in slow motion, turning the chaotic scene into a surreal, dreamlike sequence. Narrator: while the Black Panther Party faced the kinetic, lethal extremity of COINTELPRO, another demographic was subjected to a distinctly different, yet equally invasive, form of psychological warfare. The FBI categorized them as the New Left, a broad, amorphous coalition of student organizations, anti-war activists, environmentalists, and counterculture figures. The most prominent among these was the Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. Hoover viewed the New Left not as an army, but as an ideological contagion. They were the children of the middle class, the very demographic the FBI was sworn to protect, openly rejecting the established paradigm of American exceptionalism and the Cold War consensus. The Bureau's objective against the New Left was to isolate the activists from the general public, fracture their organizations, and above all, destroy their ability to communicate. Pause 2 seconds. Visual: a printing press running at high speed, churning out underground newspapers. The camera pans over headlines decrying the Vietnam War and police brutality. The ink is messy, the paper cheap. Narrator: the New Left relied heavily on a vibrant, decentralized network of underground newspapers to disseminate information, organize protests, and counter the narratives of the mainstream media. The FBI recognized these publications as the central nervous system of the movement. Consequently, they initiated a massive, covert campaign to sever this nervous system. The FBI did not merely censor the underground press, they actively sabotaged it using tactics of harassment, economic pressure, and psychological intimidation. FBI agents would intimidate the printers who produced the underground papers, threatening them with IRS audits or the loss of local government contracts if they continued to print radical material. They would orchestrate the arrest of street vendors selling the papers on minor, fabricated charges, creating a chilling effect. Visual, a close-up of a hand stamping, cancelled, in red ink over a stack of advertising contracts. The sound is a harsh, percussive thud. Narrator. But the most insidious tactics were psychological. The Bureau established a program of disseminating fake intelligence and counterpropaganda designed to fracture the New Left's coalition. They produced entirely fabricated underground newspapers, designed to look identical to genuine publications, but filled with articles attacking specific leaders, sowing racial division, or advocating for extreme, alienating violence. The FBI agents, acting as editors of these phantom publications, carefully crafted language that mimicked the rhetoric of the New Left, ensuring the deception was seamless. The goal was to create an echo chamber of paranoia, where activists could never be certain if the manifesto they were reading was a genuine expression of revolutionary sentiment or a psychological operation drafted by a federal agent sitting in an office in Washington, D.C. Pause 3 seconds. Visual, a dark room filled with swirling cigarette smoke. Several young people sit around a table, arguing intensely. The camera circles them slowly. Their eyes dart nervously toward the door and toward each other. Narrator. The FBI's deployment of agent provocateurs within the New Left was particularly aggressive on college campuses. Informants were instructed to join student organizations and immediately push for the most extreme, irrational actions possible. They would suggest bombing campus buildings, attacking police officers, or engaging in high-risk, low-reward sabotage. The objective was twofold. First, if the group agreed to the provocation, the FBI had grounds for immediate, devastating arrests, neutralizing the organization and generating negative press. Second, if the group resisted the provocation, the subsequent debate inevitably led to internal fracturing. The moderates would become terrified of the extremists, and the extremists would accuse the moderates of cowardice. The organization would collapse under the weight of its own internal contradictions, engineered by an invisible hand. Visual, a graphic displaying a complex network of lines connecting dozens of individuals. As the narrator speaks, the lines begin to sever one by one, until the individuals are entirely isolated. Narrator. This strategy, known as creating a climate of paranoia, was devastatingly effective. It is a psychological principle that when an individual believes they are surrounded by spies and traitors, their cognitive bandwidth is consumed entirely by self-preservation. Organizing a protest becomes impossible when you spend 80% of your meetings interrogating your own members to determine who is working for the state. The FBI systematically destroyed the interpersonal trust that is the absolute prerequisite for any collective political action. They induced a state of collective psychosis within the New Left, a hypervigilant exhaustion that eventually caused the movement to disintegrate not from external force, but from internal psychological collapse. Pause 4 seconds. Visual, a slow fade to a wide shot of a massive, empty university lecture hall. The rows of seats are vacant. The silence is profound. Narrator. By the early 1970s, the vibrant, mass mobilization of the New Left had largely vanished, replaced by isolated factions, deep cynicism, and a pervasive, lingering suspicion. The FBI had successfully treated a social movement as an intelligence problem, and they had solved it by breaking the minds of the people who constituted it. They demonstrated that the most effective way to defeat an ideology is to render its adherents utterly incapable of trusting one another. Scene end. Act 7, the enduring ghost of COINTELPRO. Scene start. Visual, the camera slowly tracks across a massive, dimly lit warehouse. The shelves are filled with countless identical cardboard boxes, stretching into infinity. The drone hum from Act 1 returns, lower in pitch, almost a subliminal vibration. Narrator. When we analyze COINTELPRO in retrospect, we are forced to grapple with a terrifying reality: it was not a failure of the system. It was the system functioning exactly as it was designed to function under the parameters set by J. Edgar Hoover. The program was a highly organized, bureaucratically efficient machine dedicated to the suppression of domestic dissent through psychological terror, blackmail, and lethal provocation. The physical violence, the assassinations, the orchestrated gang wars, represents the most visible scars of COINTELPRO. But the true, enduring legacy of the program is invisible. It is psychological. The FBI successfully altered the DNA of American political dissent. They established a precedent that the state possesses the capability, and the willingness, to entirely dismantle the private lives and mental stability of anyone it deems a threat. Visual, a montage of modern-day surveillance technology, security cameras, server farms, satellite dishes, facial recognition software scanning a crowd. The images flash rapidly, intercut with the black-and-white FBI files. Narrator. Today, the physical wiretaps and the mimeographed forged letters of the 1960s seem almost quaint. We exist in an era of ubiquitous digital surveillance, where the volume of data collected on the average citizen dwarfs the files kept by Hoover's FBI. The architectural framework of observation is no longer hidden, it is entirely integrated into our daily lives. We carry the tracking devices in our pockets. We broadcast our ideologies, our social networks, and our psychological vulnerabilities on public platforms. If a government agency today wished to execute a program similar to COINTELPRO, they would not need to break into an office to plant a bug or rely on a human informant to snitch jacket a leader. The algorithms of social media already perform the work of polarization, spreading disinformation, and engineering paranoia with an efficiency that Hoover could only have dreamed of. The capability for targeted psychological disruption is now automated, instantaneous, and pervasive. Pause 3 seconds. Visual, the camera pushes in on a single, blacked-out document. A solid block of redacted ink covers the entire page, save for one word, classified. Narrator. The Church Committee's investigation in the 1970s was a moment of profound illumination, a brief period where the black box of state intelligence was forced open. But the box did not remain open. New oversight mechanisms were established, yet the fundamental intelligence apparatus remained intact, merely adapting its methodologies to new legal frameworks and technological realities. The true horror of COINTELPRO is not simply what the FBI did to Martin Luther King Jr., to Fred Hampton, to the Black Panthers, or to the New Left. The true horror is the realization of what is possible when power operates without constraint, cloaked in secrecy, and driven by an ideological imperative to maintain control at any psychological cost. The watcher is always present. The observer is always calculating. And the paranoia that COINTELPRO engineered into the American psyche was not a temporary condition. It was a permanent installation. Visual, the screen slowly fades to absolute black. The low drone hum fades into the steady, mechanical click of a tape recorder, which then abruptly stops. Silence. Scene end. Image prompts for production. Image prompt 1. A highly contrasted, grainy black and white cinematic shot of a typical 1960s American suburban street. The image is inexplicably stamped with a massive, blood-red, classified marker diagonally across the center. The houses look perfectly normal, but dark, elongated shadows stretch unnaturally across the manicured lawns, suggesting an unseen, menacing presence watching from above. Image prompt 2. A close-up, macro shot of a vintage 1960s reel-to-reel tape recorder spinning slowly in a dimly lit, smoke-filled room. The lighting is harsh, casting sharp metallic reflections on the spinning reels. The background is blurred, showing only the faint silhouette of an agent in a suit wearing headphones. The atmosphere is tense, clinical, and claustrophobic. Image prompt 3. A stark, minimalist composition showing a massive pile of heavily redacted FBI memos. The documents are typewritten on yellowing paper, but 90% of the text is obscured by thick, aggressive black marker lines. Only words like neutralize, disrupt, and destroy remain legible, glowing slightly as if under a harsh desk lamp. Image prompt 4. A menacing, low-angle portrait of J. Edgar Hoover sitting at his massive wooden desk in his office. He is looking directly at the camera with a cold, dead-eyed expression. The lighting is noir style, with deep shadows obscuring half of his face. Behind him, the American flag hangs limply, and massive steel filing cabinets loom like monolithic tombstones. Image prompt 5. An abstract, conceptual visualization of the FBI's indexing system. A seemingly infinite wall of metallic filing cabinet drawers, stretching into the darkness. One drawer is pulled open, emitting a sickly, pale yellow light. Inside, instead of paper files, we see glowing, interconnected webs of red string linking thousands of tiny, blurred photographs of civilians. Image prompt 6. A split-screen composition. On the left side, a vibrant, hopeful photograph of Martin Luther King Jr. speaking passionately at a podium, bathed in warm sunlight. On the right side, the exact same moment from a different angle, but shot through a dirty telephoto lens, desaturated, grainy, with a sniper's crosshairs faintly superimposed over his chest. Image prompt 7. A close-up shot of the infamous suicide package letter sent to Martin Luther King Jr. The letter is resting on a stark white table under a harsh interrogator's light. Next to the letter is a small, unlabeled black audio cassette tape. The text on the letter is blurred, but the sheer volume of chaotic, angry typewriting is visible, conveying psychological violence. Image prompt 8. A highly stylized, chaotic montage image representing snitch jacketing within the Black Panther Party. Several men in leather jackets and berets stand in a circle in a dark room. An unnatural, glowing beam of light from an unseen source above violently illuminates one man in the center. The others are looking at him with extreme suspicion and hostility, their faces shadowed and distorted by paranoia. Image prompt 9. A dark, ominous blueprint of Fred Hampton's Chicago apartment, laid flat on a table. The blueprint is marked with aggressive red tactical arrows and circles. The room labeled Hampton's bedroom has a massive red X drawn over the bed. An FBI seal is stamped in the corner, and a half-smoked cigarette rests on the paper, letting off a thin trail of smoke. Image prompt 10. A chilling, silent aftermath scene. A bullet-riddled wall inside a dimly lit apartment, the wallpaper peeling. The holes are concentrated in a tight, violent cluster. In the foreground, out of focus, is the edge of a blood-stained mattress. The scene is shot with cold, blue-toned lighting to emphasize the clinical, execution-style nature of the raid. Image prompt 11. A symbolic representation of the FBI provoking gang violence. Two distinct, stylized logos, a Black Panther and a symbol for the U.S. organization, painted on a rough brick wall. A jagged, bleeding crack runs violently through the brickwork between the two symbols, splitting the wall apart. A discarded, forged FBI memo lies in a puddle of water at the base of the wall. Image prompt 12. A nighttime, stealthy shot of a generic, unexceptional brick building, the Media, Pennsylvania FBI office. It is pouring rain. The camera is positioned low in the bushes. In the foreground, out of focus, are a pair of hands wearing dark leather gloves manipulating a lockpick inside the side door. The atmosphere is tense, representing the moment the black box was breached. Image prompt 13. A chaotic, high-energy scene of a mimeograph machine in a dark, messy basement printing press. Thousands of sheets of paper, covered in classified FBI text, are flying out of the machine in a blur. The papers are falling to the floor, where a pile of stolen FBI files, newspapers is already waiting. The lighting is harsh and urgent. Image prompt 14. A wide, imposing shot of a massive, empty university lecture hall, rendered entirely in cold, gray tones. The rows of seats are perfectly aligned but completely vacant. The massive chalkboard at the front is wiped clean. A single, forgotten protest sign lies torn on the floor in the aisle. The image conveys the ultimate psychological defeat and the silence left in the wake of COINTELPRO. Image prompt 15. A conceptual, deeply unsettling final image. A person stands in a crowded, modern city street, looking at their glowing smartphone screen. The camera angle is from directly above, looking straight down. Surrounding the person, faintly superimposed in the asphalt like ghosts, are thousands of open eyes, unblinking and cold, representing the permanent, modernized legacy of the watcher.